Hello, welcome back to Bio 23 Infectious Disease, Chapter 14, wherein we'll learn about protozoan, helminthic, and fungal diseases. Let's start off with the protozoa. Protozoans are eukaryotic microorganisms, so they have cells that look similar to ours. One big difference is that they are all unicellular organisms. They have a nucleus like our cells, though, and organelles within the cytoplasm. Many protozoa pathogens have complicated life cycles that involve more than one host, and in some cases, they need to survive outside in the environment. A great way of doing this is to protect themselves in a protective layer, and in this life stage, they're referred to as cysts. The process of forming these dormant structures that are protective against death in the environment is called encystation. Some helminthic life cycles have transmission between hosts that takes place by ingestion of these cysts. When this happens, the protozoa have to come out of the cyst stage and form feeding structures. These feeding forms are referred to as trophozoites. The process of going from a cyst to a trophozoite is called excistation. Some protozoa in their life cycles can reproduce sexually. In this case, a single cell goes through meiosis to form 4 gametes or sex cells, and then those gametes or sex cells fuse with other gametes or sex cells to form another living cell. So this is meiosis followed by fertilization. That's not super common with protozoa, however, and all protozoa reproduce asexually, which is by simple binary fission or cell division. Most protozoa are free-living and contribute to the aquatic microorganisms that live in the oceans, rivers, and lakes. They don't cause diseases and just feed off of one another and off of microscopic bacteria and algae. There are, of course, protozoa that do cause diseases, and these protozoans are found primarily in the tropics. The reason for this is because the protozoa have to live in moist environments so they don't dry out, and tropical locations tend to have liquid water, unlike temperate locations where the water often freezes in the winter. Now, protozoa are classified into 4 different groups based on their means of motility. The first of these is the Sarcodina. The Sarcodina move in an amoeboid-like fashion and include the amoebas. This is sort of like also how white blood cells in our own body move. Then there's the mastigophores. The mastigophores use 1 or more flagella in order to swim around in aquatic environments. Then there's the ciliates, and the ciliates have small hair-like structures that cover the entire surface of the cell. These are a complex type of protozoan, and none of these cause human diseases. Finally, we have the sporozoa. The sporozoa are also referred to as apicomplexa. These protozoa completely lack any means of motility and cannot swim around or move through an environment at all. And that's because every single one of these is a pathogen and lives inside of a host. Let's start off by talking about some of these protozoan diseases and focus first on the foodborne and waterborne protozoan diseases. Let's take a look at this table really quickly, which is a nice summary of a lot of the different protozoan diseases we'll be covering in this section. The first one that we're going to talk about is Giardia, which causes giardiasis. Here's a picture of Giardia lamblia, the organism, the protozoan, that causes giardiasis. Giardia, as you can see from here, have many flagella. That makes them mastigophores. They are some of the most common causes of protozoan diseases acquired by drinking contaminated water. This primarily happens when a hiker or camper drinks water from mountain streams. Mountain streams are not nearly as pristine as one would think, and that's because even before humans got there, bears, other mammals, and especially rodents and beavers have been shedding their feces into these water sources. In fact, Giardia is commonly found in beaver intestines, and as a result is also referred to colloquially as beaver fever. The way that this flagellated protozoan transmits its disease is the microbe is shed by a mammalian host, either human or, more likely, an animal, and those shedded Giardia pathogens end up in waterways as cysts. The cysts then are ingested through a water source by a human or other mammal, and excistation occurs, resulting in the formation of trophozoites. These trophozoites attach to the lining of the intestine by means of sucking discs. As you can see from this picture here, they replicate quite readily there, ingesting a lot of food and resulting in very large populations. Typical symptoms of this stage include large amounts of diarrhea, heavy abdominal pain, and large amounts of gas. Although the diarrhea may be extensive, it's not bloody because the protozoans do not invade into the lining of the intestine. This is different from some bacteria that we've already studied and some other microorganisms that we're going to be talking about in this chapter. Symptoms usually appear about 2 weeks after infection, and so may be hard to track down the original source. The symptoms can last 6 weeks or longer. Thankfully, we do have treatments for this disease. It's pretty easy to acquire from these parks, lakes, rivers, and springs because Giardia is, in its cyst stage, resistant to chemical chlorine. In addition, its infective dose or infectious dose is as few as 10 cysts, so it's really easy to acquire if it is in the environment. It can be transmitted also from contaminated environmental surfaces and person-to-person contact by the oral fecal route, which may occur in daycare centers or nursing homes. An infected person could shed up to 10 billion cysts daily in their feces for several months, making transmission from person to person quite easy. The best way to prevent transmission is by good hand washing techniques. Giardiasis is diagnosed by finding cysts or trophozoites in the feces. However, because these cysts are only shed intermittently, feces must be examined over several days. Thankfully, there are new tests that are able to detect the cysts in stool samples, making diagnosis a little bit easier. Our next microorganism that we'll talk about is another protozoan disease transmitted in waterways, and that's cryptosporidosis. This has resulted in the largest outbreak of waterborne disease in the history of the United States, which occurred in Milwaukee in 1993. It ended up resulting in almost 500,000 illnesses and about 100 deaths. Cryptosporidium parvum is the culprit in this instance, and it's found in a variety of mammals, birds, and reptiles. The infectious oocysts are discharged into the water in fecal material from these various organisms. The oocysts undergo excistation to sporozoites that end up penetrating intestinal walls where multiplication occurs. This is already pretty detrimental to many humans, but it's particularly dangerous in patients with HIV and AIDS and other immunocompromised individuals, because it can result in potentially life-threatening diarrhea. It results in up to 25 different bowel movements per day, which in turn results in severe dehydration. Other symptoms include weakness, fever, nausea, and abdominal pain. Oocysts are not inactivated by the usual doses of chlorination, just like Giardia, and can survive for days in treated water. Also, just like Giardia, as few as 10 oocysts are sufficient to cause disease. Next, let's take a look at amoebiasis, which is caused by Entamoeba histolytica. This is a pathogenic amoeba. Amoebiasis is caused by the protozoan Entamoeba histolytica, and thus is in the Sarcodina group of protozoa. It's found in particularly common in worldwide locations, especially in areas with poor sanitation. In the United States, it's not very common and is present mostly in immigrants from other areas of the world. The life cycle starts similarly to the others with ingestion of cysts. Excistation occurs in the intestinal tract, and trophozoites emerge. There they attach to the intestinal wall, where they mature, multiply, and feed. In this case, many individuals don't show any symptoms and suffer only mild disease or none at all. However, severe disease can result, in some instances, which is accompanied by fever, bloody stools, and stomach pain. This is due to destruction of the lining of the large intestine. If someone does show symptoms, it usually occurs about 1 to 4 weeks after infection and includes dysentery, which is bloody mucus-filled stools. This results in weight loss, fever, and fatigue. Sometimes these amoeba invade the kidneys, skin, brain, spleen, and liver. This can result in detrimental diseases such as hepatitis and liver abscesses. As a result, these severe cases of amoebic dysentery have a 10% fatality rate. But again, remember this is not very common in the US. Diagnosis of amoebiasis is based on finding trophozoites or cysts in fecal smears, much like the other protozoal diseases we've heard about so far. Also, amoebic dysentery is resistant to chlorination of water supplies, including those in municipal sources. So again, the best way to deal with preventing transmission is to practice good personal hygiene, including thorough hand washing. There is another form of amoeba called the brain-eating amoeba, referred to as Naegleria fowleri. This amoeba is acquired by shooting water up the nose, either by using neti pots, devices filled with water forced into the nose to irrigate the sinuses, especially if tap water is used, or if a person is to dive into water or go water skiing, that would result in water being shot up into the nose. In this case, the amoeba travel up the olfactory nerve from the nose into the brain tissue, and there they feed on brain cells. The condition is almost always fatal, and there is no treatment for it once acquired. Because of its rarity, it's also really hard to diagnose, though there are a few people that die every year in the United States from it. Thankfully, if you just drank the water, Naegleria has no infectious ability through the digestive tract. Next, we're going to talk about one of my more favorite diseases, toxoplasmosis, a kind you can get from kitties.